left or how I left the right videos, but I haven't seen this pop up in my feed, so I kind of want to see.
In 2012, the first election I could ever vote in, I voted for Mitt Romney. In 2016, I supported Donald Trump. In 2018, I wanted America to be a white nation. And in 2024, I was genuinely excited to vote for Joe Biden for a second time. My political journey is one that I think not many people have been on. So I figured I'd share my story because every single take that I have seen on social media these past 2 weeks does not resonate with me or my experience at all. Also, to be cute, I made this little board so we can track my political journey together.
Okay.
For those who don't know, this is the political compass, where the y-axis is authoritarian to libertarian, and the x-axis is left to right. Normally economic, but for this we'll do social. I started my political journey somewhat conservative. Let's say here. I was raised Catholic and actually went to church every Sunday. Raised as such, around 13, I opposed abortion and gay marriage. Growing up in the 90s, I was also a huge nerd. I read every fantasy book I could get my hands on. Seventh Tower, Del Toro series, and Redwall because Mouse Jesus.
You know, actually, that's really fucking cool. I have the physical copies of all the Seventh Tower books right next to me. I'm dead fucking serious. In the room right next to me, I have those books. I love that series.
As well as sci-fi novels like Artemis Fowl and the like. I was also really, really into video games, though I only had a couple of them. The game I played the most, and to this day my favorite game, is a JRPG called Radiata Stories, which I almost guarantee none of you have heard of. So here's where we start. I really only care about 2 issues, and my hobbies are fantasy and escapism. My high school was fairly political, and I'd have a lot of arguments with my classmates. My friend group was fairly liberal, but none of them really seemed to have a problem with my more conservative ideas. Back in my hometown, I'd actually been a theater kid. Not to brag or anything, but I'd been the lead in my middle school musical twice. I continued my theatrical.
I think that's because when you're in high school, we don't actually understand the impacts of our political divides. So we just kind of chill with the people that we can get. We have a lot of what's called default friends. The friends that we happen to gain by the metric of them being physically around us, and really not much more. Like that phenomenon happens a lot.
Pursuits in high school, and in a twist anyone could have seen coming, I ended up hanging out with quite a lot of gay and queer kids. I saw the relationships they'd form, and they didn't really feel any different from the relationships I saw straight kids forming around the same time. That, coupled with becoming friends with them, shifted my politics a bit. Although I'm fairly certain there was a period where I was in the civil unions are okay but not gay marriage phase, and I can't remember if that ended in high school or college, but somewhere in that area. High school was also my first interaction with a trans person. One of my friends, who I had assumed was just a cis lesbian, told me at one point that they were actually a man. The really funny thing is, though, I totally accepted this and moved on. I think I even said something like, "Yeah, well, that makes sense. You know, there are male brains and female brains, so it would make sense that you could have been born with a male brain in a female body." In the modern context, it's kind of funny to think of a person being opposed to gay marriage but accepting of trans people. But the truth is, I had just never been exposed to the concept. So when I first met someone who was trans, I really had no reason to object to it. In 2008, I supported John McCain for president, though obviously I was too young to vote. I supported him because of his plan to build nuclear reactors, and I supported that because I understood the economic implications, and not just because I thought a lot of nuclear reactors sounded cool. When Obama won, I was disappointed, but I took it in stride as best I could, and life went on. It was in high school I also got really online in a way that I hadn't before. In fact, the B-board on 4chan got really big at my school. As a result, me and my friends developed a fairly dark and edgy sense of humor, although, to be fair, it was mostly just this meme.
I think that was everybody. Like, everybody in my friend group had that kind of same experience where, like, a lot of us were on 4chan, a lot of us just kind of had edgy humor, but it was like, I like how he has the picture here of the, my humor is edgy, or my humor is really dark, but it's racism. It was kind of that. Like, we had a lot of the, what's the worst thing about being a black Jew? You get to burn in the back of the oven. Like, that type of really edgy shit that ignores the real world implications of what that humor actually is in favor of. It's saying something dark because your idea of dark is racist humor.
My identification with the label nerd also really solidified around this time. My friends and I would get together for LANs of Dota, Counter-Strike, and even Halo, games which to this day I am completely trash at. But it was really nice to find a community of nerds who liked the same stuff I did. By the time I graduated high school, I had changed quite a bit politically. I was maybe here around that time. Still fairly conservative on a lot of issues, but a bit more libertarian. Being interested in theater and film as well at this point, I decided to go to Los Angeles for college. Also because I really seemed to love blue states for some reason. And this was around when the Occupy Wall Street movement was popping off. For those who don't know, the Occupy Wall Street was a movement of people who were upset that the banks had never really been punished for the 2008 financial crisis, instead getting a famous bailout. I vaguely knew the economy had tanked right when I entered high school, but I was in high school. I didn't really care about the economy, so I never really looked into it. Even though Occupy was undoubtedly a left-wing movement, it didn't really drag me to the left per se. If anything, it just made me less trustful of institutions, something which, to be fair, I was kind of already leaning towards. Regardless, college started and I made a bunch of new friends, even got into my first real relationship around this time. With a thriving social life, I found myself online less and less. And most of my friends weren't on the scary anonymous image board, so I got into Reddit. I kept up my trend of arguing politics with my friends, as most of them again were quite liberal. In 2012, when Obama was up for re-election, I supported Mitt Romney. Interestingly, I supported Mitt Romney because of his healthcare plan. Because as governor of Massachusetts, he instituted this thing called Romney Care. I'm fairly certain my girlfriend supported Obama, but we watched the election results come in together, and even though Romney lost, we were able to still, have a civil discussion and be okay with each other. End of sophomore year, I'm like, here, maybe.
Okay.
Not really much movement, mostly just a little bit more libertarian. That summer, my girlfriend and I broke up. This was rough for a number of reasons, but to be fair, it had been my idea. That, combined with my naturally argumentative nature, meant that my friends started to sour on me. Eventually it got so bad I didn't feel comfortable in my own dorm room, which I shared with two of them at the time. As I was not interacting with people as much, I ended up spending more and more time online. And then Gamergate happened. This is an important part of my story, but if you've basically just heard too much about Gamergate and you're sick of it, feel free to skip to here. For everyone else, let me set the stage, but with a caveat. The version of Gamergate that I'm about to present to you is the version that I believed at the time. Since then, I have changed my view on what happened, but for the story I'm telling, my version of events is much more important than reality. Gamergate, as I understood it, was about a woman named Zoe Quinn who had released a video game called Depression Quest. This was a fairly bad game, but it received pretty good reviews, which wasn't super weird at the time because gaming journalism was already something of a joke at this point. However, chat logs were leaked by her ex-boyfriend where she admitted to sleeping with 5 other guys, some of them while she was still with her ex, and one of them had reviewed Depression Quest. This is what I thought at the time. And I wasn't even actually mad at Zoe Quinn. I was actually mad at the guy who supposedly reviewed her game, Nathan Grayson. This culminated in many posts attacking Zoe, attacking Nathan, attacking pretty much anyone involved in the story. However, the interesting part is, I didn't actually care at this point. Because again, to me and many others, gaming journalism was dead. There was really no point in it anyway. But then threads started getting pruned and comments started getting deleted. Mods even posting about how talking about Gamergate wasn't allowed. This happened even on 4chan of all places, on V. Blue board indeed. Very quickly for me, this became an issue of censorship. Why was 4chan, this bastion of free speech and libertarianism of all places, not allowing people to talk about a current event? In addition, you'd have people like Anita Sarkeesian going on shows like The Colbert Report, at the time one of my favorite shows, and talking about how actually we were all just a bunch of angry gamer guys who wanted women out of our space.
Why do you think women are being threatened in this exchange?
I think women are perceived as threatening because we are asking for games to be more inclusive. We're asking for games to acknowledge that we exist and that we love games.
Why not just have a separate game? Have separate but equal games.
Oh my God.
This is a community I've basically been a part of my whole life, and a community I'd suffered to be a part of. I was a gamer when it wasn't cool to be a gamer, when you got made fun of for it. And to then be told that I'm making this space worse, that I'm keeping women out of this space, naturally, I just really started to hate the people telling me that. This is one of the first times I started to feel genuinely crazy, because I felt as though I had very legitimate concerns, but was told that I was sexist for even voicing those concerns, which, again, were concerns against men, not women. And this started to bleed out into my real life, too. I remember having a conversation with one of my teachers in college from a media studies course, which was basically like, let's watch a film and let's analyze it, but not from like a filmmaking perspective, from like a cultural perspective. And we were watching Kill Bill Volume 1, at the time one of my favorite films. And we were specifically analyzing the end of the movie. And my teacher made the claim that the end of this movie was racist and enforced imperialist ideas because the white woman triumphed in the samurai sword fight over the Asian woman, and the Asian woman even says something like, you bested me or something like that. I raise my hand and point out that the Asian character, played by Lucy Liu, is very explicitly supposed to be half Chinese, half American. And she just said to me, well, she's Asian, so she's closer than the white woman. And any Western audience watching this scene is going to have her interpretation and not mine. And I don't think I could think of a response, and I think the conversation just continued. I can't really remember what happened after that, but instances like that became more and more common, and
So just a side thing. So this paladin just tried to roll need on a fucking wand, and they said, oh, I need it for my mage. I'm just like, yeah, no, sorry, but you don't get to do that. You don't get to roll need on an item that your class can't fucking use. Sorry, no. Anyway.
So often would be like, just in my head about what I was doing. So naturally, just to feel like a shred of sanity, I began to turn to spaces that did talk about this kind of stuff. Around this time, I think I was watching a lot of like Sargon of Akkad and Internet Aristocrat, who's now known as Mr. Medicare. And these people were talking about Gamergate in a way that resonated with my understanding of what was going on in the world at the time. Sargon of Akkad was interesting because he was from the UK. And so as time went on, he started talking about this wave of migrants that were coming into Europe and sort of destroying European culture, which also got me into watching people like Lauren Southern, who famously
He said, yeah, she was oppressed within the context of Japanese Yakuza, but does that negate the point about colonialism? So bear in mind that there is a subset of people who cannot compartmentalize the different lenses that we can use to analyze things. Seeing what happened to Armored Skeptic is wild. Yeah. Jassa says the mention of the name Sargon makes me wince and cringe. Also Armored Skeptic. Well, let's refresh that part and maybe see if there's something that we're missing.
Just in my head about what I was doing. So naturally, just to feel like a shred of sanity, I began to turn to spaces that did, specifically analyzing the end of the movie. And my teacher made the claim that the end of this movie was racist and enforced imperialist ideas because the white woman triumphed in the samurai sword fight over the Asian woman, and the Asian woman even says something like, you bested me or something like that. I raise my hand and point out that the Asian character, played by Lucy Liu, is very explicitly supposed to be half Chinese, half American. And she just said to me, well, she's Asian, so she's closer than the white woman. And any Western audience watching this scene is going to have her interpretation and not mine. And
I mean, I can kind of see where they're going for there. I can kind of see what the position is there. Like, hey, it's about the fact that when the West does the things that the Orient does, we do it better. Like, that's an interpretation. That's kind of one of the benefits of something being art, is we can interpret it a bunch of different ways. But at the same time, that's like, to say that that's 100% what the message is kind of weird. It's a message one can get from it.
about this wave of migrants that were coming into Europe and sort of destroying European culture, which also got me into watching people like Lauren Southern, who famously also was opposed to some of the migration coming into Europe.
Famously
so now I've graduated
to
college
some of
and
the
I'm,
migration.
let's say
That's
around
one way of doing it.
Here. I still think of myself as libertarian, but with my thoughts on immigration and feminism, I've certainly shifted a bit more to the right. Over the course of senior year, I'd been able to get an internship at Machinima, at the time, internet nerd mecca. I also reconnected with some people that I had known throughout college, but hadn't been part of that kind of core friend group. And I ended up kind of getting welcomed into their friend group, so hey, Ed.
Said he's trying to argue he was introducing nuance and the teacher blew him off. Sure, that happened just the way he recalls. I mean, you got to think, though, from his perspective, and that's what he's explaining, is that this is how things felt to me when I was doing this stuff when I was younger. It felt to him like he was introducing nuance, or at least an alternative perspective. And his teacher decided to blow him off, and that upset him. Like, that was his experience. What matters more than what actually happened is how it made him feel. And I say that because whenever you're arguing with somebody, the reality of a situation is one thing. The objective reality is one thing, but how they felt about that situation is going to be the thing that truly colors their perspective. None of our perspectives are colored by objective reality because we don't engage in objective reality the way that we think we do. Our colors our perspectives are shaped by our idea of what happened to us more than what actually happened to us, which is a very, very different situation.
Had friends again. With my bills taken care of and a bunch of friends, again, I wasn't spending so much time on the internet. As I still loved talking politics, I'd talk it with them all the time. But this time, the result was I actually started to shift a bit more to the left, or at least the center. One of them actually convinced me to start supporting unions, something I'd been quite opposed to up until that time, by pointing out that the concept of collective bargaining was actually fairly important when you're talking about balancing power structures, appealing to my more libertarian nature. Because of my experience in high school, I'd also never stopped supporting trans rights. And I honestly think that that specific opinion is what allowed so many of my much more liberal friends to sort of look past a lot of my other politics, because to their mind, at least, I supported this one position.
That's because the one position you supported was the one that wasn't abstract. So, like, you can have weird economic policies when you're in the more lefty circles, but so long as you're not a dick about social issues, that's almost always going to be the thing that people hang their hat on. Now, granted, the other half of that, a very important other half of that conundrum, is that nobody on any side of the political spectrum seems to be completely informed about the fact that our opinions on economic policies have a direct result on the social classes that we want to raise up. Like, class never truly gets divorced from race or gender or anything, but we all kind of feel like it does. Like, we all kind of feel like it is divorced. And so we get to have that separation. So, like, you've got a friend who says that, like, you've got a friend with a lot of black friends, right? And that friend wants the defunding of inner city schools. They want the defunding of schools in general. They want more people to engage in private education. They want to lower the amount of tax money that goes from property taxes into schooling districts. They want to redistrict all that stuff. But that's all super abstract. That's all really, really abstract unless they explain every single bit of that policy to you and what the end result of each of those policies would be. Hey, person who hangs around black people and has a lot of black friends, why do you want their children to not be able to go to school? What kind of a world do you think happens when inner city kids only have the option of private school that their parents may not be able to afford? What situation do you think comes up when you introduce a system like that? And oftentimes either they haven't thought that far ahead or you didn't think that far ahead to fucking ask. So they get to have this weird, cringy belief that hurts the people that they supposedly support. So you can be libertarian and be in favor of trans rights, not realizing that your like laissez-faire capitalism solution to shit ends up meaning that trans people have less access to HRT. And when they have less access to HRT, their suicidality goes up. Congratulations, you support trans rights, but at the same time, you support policies that will strip those same people of necessary things in order to live a happy and healthy life. So yeah, this makes sense to me. I can understand having a group of friends that are just like, economics are maybe a little weird. I don't know, but he's okay. He's cool with trans people, so why not? Like, I get it. I get it.
I've seen a lot of videos talking about stuff like this. I've never seen a video from someone who's gone as far as I have, which is why I really wanted to share.
I like how, so we've got Hunter Abalones, which I remember having the abortion conversation with him over on my channel. We've got Xander Halls. Okay. I think this is what, non-competes? And then I don't know who this one, I don't know this one, and I don't know Adam something. These are ones I don't know, actually.
My story, because this was my lowest point. This is literally the worst I had ever been in my entire life, bar none. And what I want to talk about now is how I found my way back. To reiterate, started conservative, then supported Bernie, then supported Trump, and now wanted the ghost of Hitler to come back and take over America.
So this is the part that I think is going to be interesting, because this is going to be where we get information that likely can help us actually turn people away from problematic positions.
Good? Good. The first person to really get me back into a more sane place of mind is my aunt, who I owe a lot to. She had continued to talk to me during this entire time period, even debating with me about stuff, including certain events during World War II. My conversations with my aunt continued mostly because I felt like she could actually listen to me. She could actually hear what I was saying and respond to me in ways that, to me at least, indicated that she understood what I was saying.
Okay.
And I remember I was having an argument with her about how 6 million seemed a little too high. It was probably close to 200,000, and I very specifically mentioned the wooden doors. While at first she just sort of stumbled around saying things like, why does this even matter? And then, you know, if there is a number, why does it matter how big the number was? And finally she asked me, where did you read about this? And I remember going online after our conversation, obviously, to look this stuff up so that the next time I talked to her, I would have it all laid out for her in plain black and white.
So wait. You were quoting memes. You were quoting memes at your aunt, and you had no source to back any of it up yet. All right, I think I'm on the same page.
And I couldn't actually find the website I'd found the first time. And when I kept digging, I found someone who showed me how absolutely wrong I was. So I started doing more research and found out that actually wooden doors had been proposed by people who were working for the company that was making Zyklon B around this time. And suddenly I realized everything I had thrown away my friends for, everything I had espoused, everything I had basically ruined my entire life over was just a lie.
Yeah?
And that really sucked. This period of my life was actually worse than when I was a Nazi, because when I was a Nazi, at least I had a community. I had people I could talk to. Now I straight up had no one. Like, imagine going back to your friends and saying, hey, sorry, no, I was a Nazi, totally not a Nazi anymore. Let's be friends again. None of them wanted to see me again. I started, of course, being attacked by the very people that I used to felt I belonged with. And suddenly I realized there was a lot less love in this community than I had thought there was. And once I realized all of this had been a lie, I started wondering what else I believed might have been a lie. And
you had to go through a period of Reconstruction. So this shit happens a lot with people who, like, become atheists. They're used to having church as a default community. They're used to having family as their default community. When they leave religion, they've got to build a new one. The problem is, when you're building your first communities, when you're young, all of this shit is default. All of this is the shit that you just get naturally around you because it's where you are. But once you leave home, once you're out in the real world, now suddenly that community that you're trying to build is much harder to put together because where do you go? How do you do that? If you can't get your community from church, well, maybe you can get it from work, but everybody at work has different opinions and shit than you, so maybe you can't get it from work. Maybe you can get it from your hobbies. Well, all your hobbies, the friends you made there had a different belief structure, and when you talk to them about this, you get shut down. So now, how do you remake your group? And not just how do you remake a group of people where you can exist, how do you remake a group where you honestly feel like you belong, where you can say something out into the ether and not get shut down for it? How do you do that?
It turns out it was a lot. So I started doing my own research. In the end, I ended up tearing down basically every single one of my beliefs and building up my entire worldview from scratch. I realized that some institutions were actually good and even necessary for society to function. I realized that 2008, while it wasn't entirely the fault of the banks, more importantly, breaking them up wouldn't really have addressed the underlying issues that caused that crisis. My views on immigration changed as I realized that their contribution to the economy was a lot greater than I thought, and I even started thinking of immigration as an economic market in and of itself.
It is!
People sorting themselves into the areas where they could find the greatest amount of opportunity. And lastly, for race and women, well, here's a photo of my wedding day. So I'll let you figure out how that one went. Just to be clear though, this was not a quick process. It probably wasn't until the end of 2019 that I really was in a more kind of central place. And by 2020, sure enough, I was riding with Biden. And that's basically the end of my political journey. I'm essentially here to this day, although
well, I'm proud
my
of you,
friends
at least.
describe me as a centrist by average of extremes, as opposed to anyone who actually has centrist positions. But let's now talk about what I believe the left can do to help men who are in the position
Here's the
I
part
was
where we
in
need
just
stuff.
a few years
We need
ago.
this info.
Firstly, let's acknowledge something. My path out of the far right is not one we can expect most people to follow. It involved a lot of me doing my own research, and people just genuinely don't seem to like to do that. Looking back,
they
most
don't.
of my more radical positions weren't things I reasoned or researched my way into. They were usually just the positions of a community I was a part of that I had joined because they were talking about a completely unrelated issue that I cared about. Even when I drifted a little more to the left, it was because of the conversations I was having with my friends or the community I was a part of. And therein lies both a problem and a path forward. The problem is that you're fighting against the inertia of communal conditioning. But the path forward is that most of these communities are online these days, which means there are fantastic avenues to reach out to men, both before and during radicalization. Though I didn't talk about it as much, my incel phase was brought about by the very real issues I, as a man, faced when I was dating. Like, here's a great example. There's a fear in a lot of these communities of men who have never had sex that if they're ever alone with a woman, she'll try to ruin his life by falsely me-tooing him.
From what I read on the internet, I read that it's unsafe to even be in the same room as like a woman without a third party.
I think a lot of times this purely gets chalked up to a hyperfixation on a small number of instances. But in my opinion, there's actually a deeper underlying concern there, and it's one men don't get to talk about a lot. Namely, that it's really hard to be the pursuer in romantic situations.
That's
It's
true.
difficult to know things like when should you approach someone and when.
Lenari says falsely, no, I'm not gonna. So I can say that yes, it seems stupid and extreme and all of those things to have that position. I can say that with confidence. I can also say that I have heard from people that I trust of situations where they were with a partner, not a random person, a partner. And this partner got intimate with them and then afterwards said, actually, I don't think I really consented to that. And the fucking absolute panic that you go through when a person that you've been with for several months that you think you can trust has now demonstrated that they might actually do that thing that you're worried about. Because what's the version of that events that they're telling to their mom? What's the version of that events that they're telling to their friend? What's their version of those events that is making it outside of the circle? And that's the thing that you've got to be careful about. That's the thing that Like, we could say, yeah, but here's the thing. Once we start doing that, all we've done is demonstrated that we would also be those people who would not listen to any context. We would also be those people who would alienate that person and allow them to lose everything without being able to demonstrate anything with any amount of evidence. That's what we've demonstrated when we have that as our default reaction. And that's a scary thing, because whether it's deserved or not, if you have that thought, if that's a fear of yours, if your knee-jerk reaction is, falsely, if that's the knee-jerk reaction you go to, then all you've done is confirm that fear. Whether that fear is deserved or not, you've now made that fear a reality. They've now looked at whomever has said that and said, you would throw me on the funeral pyre without evidence. This is information I now have. This is information I need to internalize. And now, guess what? That person who's internalized that information, they're probably going to go online. This is going to be one of those experiences that they talk about with people on the internet, and they're going to find a community of incels that are going to reinforce their negative behavior. They're going to reinforce behaviors that they should not be reinforcing, but they've already had it demonstrated to them sufficiently that they're not safe elsewhere.
And shouldn't you? How can you show interest without seeming desperate? And how do you take the initiative without making them feel pressured? Men do need spaces to talk about these kind of issues. And as much as you might say, oh, well, men already have spaces, in my experience, they don't. And if they already did, how did Andrew Tate explode in popularity? Remember, the main thing the guy sells to young men is how to get women. And it's not helpful when people say, oh, don't go to, the red pill space. They're bad. They'll teach you bad habits. And then you say, oh, okay, good to know. I won't go there. So where should I go? And everyone's just like...
And you can't give them an answer.
Just be yourself, bro. Men will just find other spaces where they can have those conversations. And some of those spaces will have underlying agendas. A large part of my journey towards radicalization was uncritically accepting misinformation. And I think, in general, pushing back against misinformation is good, but you're always going to be one step behind them. Now, personally, I think this is just people getting used to the internet. Anytime any new mode of communication comes out, misinformation spreads with it as a result. Encouraging critical thinking, trying to get people to interface with the internet as a not necessarily trustworthy medium. These kinds of things will come with time as people get more used to it. But a much larger part of that is building spaces that are comfortable with engaging in these kinds of conversations, even when your conversation partner is someone you might personally find deplorable. I know there's a lot of people on the left who say, they hate engaging with the right, it's very tiring, they hate, combating all the misinformation. But the problem is people on the right do not have similar qualms about engaging with the left. One thing of caution, though, is I think these spaces have to not be political, at least at first. I've seen a lot of people say stuff like, we need a Joe Rogan of the left, and frankly, I tend to agree with this. But then they just keep suggesting people like political streamers, when, in my opinion, Joe Rogan's fans don't see his show as, inherently...
That is actually true. So... people who watch Joe Rogan watch him because they think he's the dude bro at the corner. Like, he's the dude bro at the gym who says, hey man, I've got an ounce in the back. You want to go stare at the sky with me? Like, that's what Joe Rogan is to them. He's not a political tour de force. When you get somebody who's a fan of Hassan, they're a fan of Hassan for two reasons. They either like his politics or they think he's hot. For Joe Rogan, there are people who are there because they think he's funny. There are people who are there who like the guests he brings on. There's a ton of apolitical reasons why somebody likes Joe Rogan, and then they end up buying into the politics of the stream as the whole.
A political space. In fact, the vast majority of his guests are just comedians that he just talks about, whatever's going on. I personally first really got into Joe Rogan when he was interviewing some of those people who were criticized by people I perceived as the radical leftists, the postmodern neo-Marxists that are controlling the universities, like that kind of thing. No, I can do it better. I can do it better, Jordan Peterson. Hold on, I can do it better. It's not right. He gave a platform to talk about something which I was curious about and wanted that kind of perspective on. and that no one else was talking about at that kind of time. And then because I'd kind of already bought into him as a result of that, I stuck around. But again, I didn't start listening to Joe Rogan because I liked his politics. I started listening to Joe Rogan because he had an interesting space. There's nothing inherently wrong with labeling spaces as political. Just know that they're never going to be gateways. They're never going to help people genuinely shift their positions unless they're interacting with another political space that already exists. But the problem in that case is you really have to know not just your own side's arguments, but the other side's arguments really, really well. Some of my most successful interactions that I've had with people online started with me engaging with people who had a different opinion than me. I was able to speak with a language and in a manner that let them know that I heard them and that I understood where they were coming from. And in some of those cases, I was able to convince people to come over to my side. Well, a little bit, and maybe I'm just flattering myself. I don't know. Sound off in the comments if you hate me. So the takeaway here from former white nationalist turned, I don't know, liberal now, I guess? I don't know. The internet labels politics really weird. If you ask like a leftist, I'm probably like center right. And if you ask someone on the center right, I'm probably far left. So I don't know. I have a lot of weird positions from both ends of the political spectrum. And anyway, for the average person, we just need more spaces where people...
You know what? I think, Portable Orange, if you are seeing this, and I know this is mostly just listening to your words and then me kind of commenting on them every now and again because I'm playing World of Warcraft hardcore and I'm trying desperately not to die because I'm the tank, and if I die, everybody in this group dies with me, and I don't want to be responsible for their deaths. Because, like, we've all got 30 plus hours invested in our characters, and if they die, they're gone forever. But if you ever want to hop on for a conversation about what your political positions are, I would be more than willing to host that. That sounds like something that would be really fun to talk about, honestly. Tara says LMAO multitasking.
Can come and hang out. And for the people who've already started to go down the path towards radicalization a little bit, we need people who can interact with those spaces. Trying to get everyone on your side is a futile endeavor. And frankly, in a political context, opposition is a very positive thing, but not all is lost. If you can take away anything from my story, take away this. Things can always get better. Thanks for watching. Different from my other...
Okay, well, I thought it was interesting. I don't know, let me know in the comment section. What do you think? Did you think it was interesting? Because for me, watching somebody's political journey, watching how they go from one side to another, I think it's interesting, but I'm also in the business of trying to get people to change their mind politically and become better versions of themselves and become healthier. Like, that's what I'm in the position of doing. I think that we generally work better when we have more accurate information, and we are kinder to the people around us when we have context about their lives. So I'm going to have a unique interest in stuff like this, but that's just me. But yeah, you know what, Portable Orange, if you happen to see this, or one of your fans happens to see me watching this, fuck it, reach out. Why not? Let's have a chat. This seems interesting. This seems like an interesting thing to hammer out, the actual political positions, where we are, and how we can get people to move their own political needles. That sounds like fun to me. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full-time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Limor Pinku, Love Bunny Games, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Aurora, Leela Ururaka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.